No matter what tools or access you have to climbing, you can improve the ability to stay clear headed. You can improve the ability to visualize and plan. You can improve the ability to commit and analyze. There's so many things you can improve your base ability as a climber, but you need to improve being the driver. You can you can be stronger in the fingers. You can be stronger in the arms. You can be stronger in the core. But you are driving your ship as a human, as an athlete, as a climber. So you have to always practice awareness and you always have to practice aggression.
Okay, Tim, my dude, how's it going, man?
Josh, what's up? It's going good. It's good to see you again.
Could you tell by the way I said, my dude, how excited I am to be here with you, my dude, today?
Yeah, sometimes you're mega stoked, and it's probably just because you're rock climbing. And actually, that's when I'm the most stoked, is when I'm just rock climbing too.
Yeah. I am mega stoked. It's not just the extra coffee that I had. I don't know. Life has just been good to me lately. My kids aren't sick. I'm not injured. The stock market is up. I'm got lots of friends right now that I get to hang out with. But yeah, really, what it is I'm climbing and feeling better. I've been on that moonboard, dude. I started maybe in April, like feeling like, oh, I need to get back in shape. I need to like take my climbing seriously, get out of that ski season, and just kind of coming into my own now that it's July and like 95 degrees. So it's maybe not prime temps, but yeah, I'm obsessed with the 2016 mood board, man. I am
That's awesome.
fully obsessed.
When you started climbing on it, I know you kind of instantly had the reaction that I had, which was like it's not as cool as the 2019 set. Which I mean, most to be fair, most people go from 2016 to the 2019 set. I still know a lot of people who haven't ever pulled on the 2019 set board because I think they're just like first. I mean, less accessible, less gyms have them, but also like I think there's so much hype around that old school set that people enjoy keeping it. But objectively, in my opinion, the holds are less comfortable. The layout is not as good, and the climbs are far more repetitive. Like a lot of the climbs on the board seem like very very similar. Like I mean, most of the climbs will have like most of the climbs V4 and under will have the exact same holds, just in like slightly different configurations or like one intermediate or something. But a question for you: do you notice any like actually two questions? Do you have a different opinion on the board itself, the 2016 set? Now, do you like it more, and for what reasons? Because I think I know you like it more. But two, do you feel in shape compared to when you were rampaging the 2019 set, or what percentage of shape do you feel?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll tackle that first one where I don't know. I am really enjoying the 2016 in a way. There's just there's this love that I think you can find when you go deep on anything. Like it's I would agree that the 2019 set is as a whole more fun. There's more variety. I mean, there's literally like double the holds or something, right? Like I mean, it's just
You mean the
more
2019
holds.
set?
Oh yeah. 2019 set
Yeah.
has like double the holds of the 2016 set. So
Does it really?
yeah, because 2016 is just not filled out. It,
Yeah, yeah.
and on 2019 every T nut is full. So yeah, I definitely have had that experience where I swipe to a new V8 off of an old V8 and I look at it and I think to myself, these are basically the same climb. Like that's the same move from that, like the same crux move, but with a different foot or something.
Right.
And that's just kind of the nature of the beast, whatever. Uh, and so I'm enjoying it. My buddy Mark Heel pointed out that 2016 is a little more savage because a lot of the holds are more in cut, where 2019, a lot of those wood holds are a little rounder, a little more, I want to say friendly, actually, maybe a little more technique focused, a little less
Mm.
like jump and snatch. There's more in cut holds on 2016. So it's just different. I don't really want to pass judgment on better or worse. Although I would hope that moon climbing, when they put out new hold sets, that they are getting better, right? Like you just hope that like, okay, each set we put out is more fun. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm until I get through them all, I'm not going to say one is really better than the other, but I'm having a blast, and that's really what counts. And yeah, to your question about how I'm feeling compared, uh, I started out kind of the same. I was out of shape. I was in the middle of the pandemic, hadn't been climbing when I started out on 2019. And I basically did this thing where I had never even really been on a moonboard. So I build a moonboard and then just start at the bottom, right? Like V3, and I was like, I'm going to do all the benchmarks because isn't that what makes sense? You open the app, you're like, start at number one, go up. And so I kind of did the same thing here where I just started at, the V4s or whatever I've been going through. And the thing is right now, I'm definitely not as strong as I was at the end of my 2019 moonboard season. I really got into shape by doing it, and that's kind of my goal here too. Uh, I'm probably at like 85 to 90% of my best though. I'm a
Wow.
little, yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I'm a little heavy. It's really hot. I just haven't had the time to climb a ton, but like, maybe that's not doing myself justice, but I know how hard, like sometimes you don't realize how good a shape you're in when you're in good shape. You're like, yeah, I'm tired, or like things still feel hard. And then you get out of shape and you're like, whoa, I was strong. So yeah, it's July right now. I'm hoping to really peak for that fall winter season. So give me another 2 months of consistent moonboarding. I'm in the V8s. I've got 15 V8s left and 80 total benchmarks left.
I was gonna say I
Yeah,
pulled up. Do you know how many exact? I think sometimes the filters are weird, but mine says there's 542 problems and you have 80 left.
yeah,
It's crazy.
542. Tell me
That's
that's
a
not
lot,
daunting. Yeah, that's
dude. That's a
freaking
lot more
crazy.
than the other two sets, right?
Yeah, when I did the 2019, I did 217 benchmarks out of the 219 benchmarks at the time, and I think now there's 300 something, but
Oh, okay.
540 climbs is a lot, man. Like it really
Yeah,
is kind of wild.
and they keep adding them too. I mean, I'll go back to the 2016 set and be like, all right, I know I've done all the sevens and under, and I'll pull up and be like 20 new climbs. I'm like, oh god, like there's always new climbs. So for
That's
someone
your
like you
warm up
who
though.
that is my warm. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have the warm up, but also, dude, I gotta say, like, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on the 2016 set board as well because I know you climb on it pretty much primarily. That's the vast majority of the type of climbing you get. But if I go on it, I choose right. Like especially in Salt Lake City, I'm not in Salt Lake City anymore. But when I was in Salt Lake City, if I ever pulled on that board, there was probably a very specific reason why I was pulling on that board, and I did pull on the board at least probably once a week. But even in the warmups, the only reason I would get on that board was to thrash myself, like purposefully. Like, what's the quickest way to get my skin hurting, to get my skin tougher, to get my fingers feeling like they've been worked, like crazy worked, right? And like all in split ways, like you're rock climbing. And the warmups did that for me too. Like the warmups are really abrasive and aggressive, and like it was almost too hard to climb clean and like climb really, really well on those climbs. And like use extra power or like extra technique to make the movements easier. It's almost like you couldn't really do that on a lot of the sixes and sevens, and that just added a lot of like, I don't know, abrasion on my skin and my fingers. And I'd be like halfway through my warm up, my usual warm up, and be like, damn, like, on the kilter board, I could hop straight on like V9, V10 with cold turkey, no warm up. And I wouldn't feel like I could hurt myself or much often, but I could pull on V4 my first climb on the moonboard and still feel like I could tweak myself. But that's just for me. Like the moonboard for me is so aggressive. It's so abrasive.
Yeah, I definitely do a warm up on my hangboard slash, just my little movements to kind of, some pull-ups and stuff for maybe 20 minutes before I even pull on. And then sometimes I just pull on and just kind of sit there and walk my feet around. Do you ever do that? Like where you just
Nice.
find a
Oh yeah,
couple of decent holds and like you're not even climbing, you're just walking your feet around. Uh
yeah. I mostly like touching the holds, like just grabbing really hard or like moving my feet, but like staying on the same holds and like reorienting grip, kind of like what Dave was saying from our last podcast, like just
mm.
feeling the grip orientations and stuff.
What yeah, what holds do you really like on the 2016? Like do you have any like favorites or anti or sorry, the ones you really don't like? Because I just think it's interesting because everyone's different and it has shown me some of my kryptonite and I'm just kind of curious because also extends into your general climbing. And that's one of the fun things about boards is finding out what you're bad at. And now you have a tool to get better at it.
Totally. Man, that's a good question. I definitely, I don't really like almost any of the holds. Is like my number one reaction. I think there's maybe like if you have the board like app up, the E18 finish hold, like the white one right in the middle, is like easily my favorite like good hold to jump to or whatever. The G14 horizontal pinch, like kind of the flat slopey one, like that really bad bar pinch.
Not the one that you can pinch actually with your thumb, like it's just flat.
It's just no, well, it's the one, it's that one that's circled.
Oh, well, dude, Tim. Oh, that one is
That one,
sick. I
yeah.
actually really like that. Yeah, I was gonna say I thought it was that white one that you really can pinch well. It's like a jug. I was
Oh
like,
no.
Tim, you're just saying all your favorite holds are jugs. Like
Yeah.
that's not fair.
No, so like those types of holds in general, like in climbing gyms or like in competitions, I like holds that are like a little more simple because that just allows for, a lot of different movements. Like there's a lot of climbs on that G14 pinch that, you kind of climb differently. Like
Mhm.
I think uh I think it's
So
called Hakusai. It's like my favorite
so
V9 on the board.
what's interesting about that pinch? So the pinch you're describing, Tim, is it's basically very flat and big. Like it's like a sloper that maybe sticks out, all the way almost. I mean, it's got to be like a 3 inch long pinch, and it's flat on top, and you can use your thumb to kind of. It's almost like you're grabbing like a duck bill, like.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know how else to say
Yeah,
it.
your
Like,
hand's like a duck bill. Yeah.
yeah, like do like the Pac-Man motion with your hand, and that's like what it's like. But what's
Yeah.
really interesting is there's a lot of so I actually find that hold really good, right? Like I can like jump to that kind of like speaks to a certain kind of strength of mine where I
Hmm.
like that hold. I think it's actually like pretty darn good, and jumping to it is no big deal for me. Then what's interesting is a lot of those climbs make you use that as your top hand to jump to a finish hold. And what I
Hmm.
found is that you get a high foot, and then what happens is you try to jump and it pushes you away from the wall, so now you're relying entirely on your pinch to pull you into the wall, and that doesn't work so well. And so I've noticed on some of the harder climbs when that happens, the trick will be you have a lower hand. Like I remember this one where you had like a gas stone, you know I don't know, it's like it was a black gas stone underneath it, and the trick to launch was to really make sure that you pulled in with that gas stone before you launch, rather, even though your high hand was that sloper. And that there's something really cool that moonboard jumpiness teaches you. And it's like this sequencing to make sure that you get the most out of each hold so that you can launch. Because let's face it, a lot of those moonboard climbs are about setting yourself up for a jump in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and catching.
Yeah, you're saying something really interesting there, where like this pinch is so compromising just because of like how slopey it is and how you have to grab it, and what it doesn't allow. And I have a secondary trick that I've learned on that pinch as well, or just like slopey pinches with bad texture in general. Um, but you're saying that basically everything else around the pinch is what allows you to use the pinch better. Like timing it better, setting up, and do you need drive on the board a lot? Like the number one issue of movements on the board is generally distance, right? It's hard to create distance on the board, and like the correct type of distance. You're saying that you can easily be pushed backwards, so pulling inward with the pinch is really important. And I totally agree with that. I think that stuff is really, really important to learn. But sometimes like the moves are still too hard for me. Like even if I time everything better and better, I'm still like way too far from grabbing the finish hold, or I'll grab the finish hold and then my hand will come off that pinch. Like specifically on this climb, Hakusai, this V9 is probably my favorite V9. It's probably my favorite climb on that 2016 set. You got to look it up.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
looking it up as you're.
yeah, I love this climb. It's so cool. There's another V9 I think that has the exact same hold on it, and it comes from that black undercling as well. Um, but I gotta say, texture for me has been a huge thing on these boards. And I was just telling Josh, I was watching. I sent him a couple of recommendations to do that I thought were really, really hard climbs, and he basically shit on them, just cruised them. And I was watching his videos, and I was like, I can't even do the moves like that. Like I think I'm definitely strong enough to do the moves like that, but I felt like I've never been able to, and mostly because the boards that I climb on are extremely greasy boards, and Josh has a brand new board, and I think that has a huge difference. Like, And I've climbed on really good boards. I've climbed on very positive, you know, uh, what's the pour? The pour on the holds are like
Mm-hmm.
bigger, so the holds themselves are actually more in cut, especially the yellow holds. I've grabbed boards that are just grittier plastic. I've grabbed boards that are brand new, and I've definitely climbed on all of them, but most boards are super, super greasy. And that black pinch for me, if it's greasy, I grab it a different way. If it's new, I grab it a different way. If I grab it new, I duck bill pinch it every time. I call it cup grip, where I just like cup the hold as much as possible, and I get as much as that like webbing between my index finger and my thumb, like on the friction of it with like more surface area there is really good for me. But if there's no friction, if there's no grip on the hold, there is no friction. There's no point of getting surface area. So what you need is leverage. And so for me, those holds, I actually end up pinching curled fingers a lot. Like I'll grab it and then I'll just curl my fingers into it. And then I still won't pull on the hold. I'll still just like do exactly what you said. Well, my body will operate around that curled pinch. But I found myself grabbing a lot of like fiberglass and like holds that don't feel like the texture is perfect when you want it to be, and you need to do like if you want to create a lot of drive on the holds, I tend to not use my friction, right? Because friction feels great when it feels great, but it doesn't exactly do what you want it to. So sometimes you have to control the friction by just like anchoring your fingers into the hold. And I found myself doing that on that specific pinch more than any other hold that I've climbed on.
I want to bookmark that and revisit it when we go into the Dave Fitzgerald reflections, because it's something that really stood out for me with Dave. Was Dave is infamous for very strong fingers, but what he said was, yeah, I mean, he has strong fingers. He's not not acknowledge that, but that there's a lot of technique around moving around small holds, and it was just this reminder that there's a technique to bad holds instead of just getting stronger. And so I think that's cool, like hearing how you adapt to the situation and recognizing maybe sometimes you can just yard straight out, and that's the best technique of the day. And maybe it's 90 degrees and you're just greasing off of things, and that is not going to be the technique of the day. Or, you're not strong in that certain sense. So you have to really understand how to utilize your body to make the most of that specific hold on that specific time. I love that. I just think dude, climbing, I just listened to some podcast all about training. It was actually the podcast that John Cardwell mentioned. I'm blanking on it now. It was a Nugget podcast about energy systems and training, and it's really great. And the guy goes deep on training. But something that I think about when I think about climbing and what we do here is that climbing, and he actually even says this. He says climbing may be the most technically complex sport there is.
Wow.
And it's something that we're not against training. We all train, and I'm going to get into some training I'm doing later. But it's just like we have such a complex sport that changes for each body with each day, with each skin condition, and it just I don't want to take anything away from other sports like running or swimming, where it's like it's still a beautiful sport, but it's maybe more repetitive, and maybe we really do know what the best technique is. And I'm sure if we are in the mind of a Michael Phelps and how he swam, there's like an infinite amount of technique that he thinks about in every stroke. But I want to argue that what we do is so technically complex that is always where the main focus goes. And that's why we can get these athletes like Chris Sharma or Dave Graham, or I mean, honestly, most top climbers, and you ask them what their training is and they say, training, why are we talking about training? Like, let's talk about all these boulders that I'm developing my skill on throughout decades of experience. And that's really what matters. So
Yeah,
I don't know how I went down that rabbit hole, but yeah.
Dude, I have a way of tying this back to the moonboard, which is not what we're talking about today, but we're talking about the moonboard right now because Josh and I obsess about the moonboard, of course. But I thought about this kind of this theory in climbing since I started, to be honest, where I found the sport for me where I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to do my whole life. I've been climbing trees for the last 8 years of my life, and now I'm here. I found my place, and when I discovered, and by the way, our gym, with you in it, and so many strong climbers, like Ross was like a kid I looked up to, and there was a kid that Ross looked up to named Mirko Caballero, who was like, he was the youngest climber to climb V14 You can just look him up, Mirko Caballero. He is the prodigy of climbing before, I think, Adam Ondra. At that time, he was probably more famous of a young prodigy climber than Adam Ondra was. Even at that time, I think it was close. But if he had continued his career, he would still be way, way, way up there. But I think seeing that as a very, very early climber, I was immediately, as a V1, V3, V5 climber, I was like, wow, like V14 is like, I can see it. Like it looks possible one day, but most people, when they go climbing for their first time, most people, tap out their kind of perceived thought of what's possible in climbing at like V8, V9, right? Because how many climbers climb harder than that in most gyms, right? And so I was lucky enough to see that and start to go down my own rabbit holes of, discovering climbing and whatnot. And my opinion on so far what I've seen in the last 11 years is that we haven't even tapped out, as far as climbing knowledge, as far as climbing science, as far as climbing techniques, for most efficient practices, for most optimal movements and practices. I don't think everyone truly understands, even at the highest possible level. I don't think we understand all of climbing, right? Like the most masterful rock climber, right now still has tons to discover. And I think that's what makes our sport so cool, is that you can grab the same grips a million times and still discover something new about what's better.
I love that. And it makes me think of when we were talking with Dave last time, and I don't think this made it into the episode or it was live, but I talked about that experience I had on Diesel Power in the Valley. And Diesel Power is this stunning arete that's like V10. I found it extremely difficult at V10. That's the Valley for you, or maybe it's just me in the Valley. And there's this come in move where you're fully tipped out, and you have to come into a hold that's maybe at your chest. So you go from fully tipped out, like 6 foot span, to 4 foot, and so it's kind of compression, and you're on this right foot around the corner, and it's really hard. Or I found it really hard because I'm really tipped out. So I basically have no ability. I have no left foot to control that left hand leaving and coming in. So it's basically like catching a barn door, right? And I watched my video. So I did it. I was like, wow, cool. Like I did it. I don't know. I was just psyched. And you can see and so I'm watching my video, you can see I'm like tipped out. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm kind of like struggling. I'm kind of like shifting my hips around. Like, what the fuck do I do? And then I do this thing where I basically pogo with my left foot. So I swing my left foot out, which gave me a little counterbalance for a moment when my left hand came in to catch that hold. So I had that little moment of pause in the barn door where it gave me time to establish on that hold. And the reason why I bring it up and what you're talking about is like, what do I call that? Is that like a pogo? Like, and the reason why I say, what do I call it, is because it's like, why is there no name for this? Like, I'm not saying I invented some move and I didn't even know what I was doing, but it's just what techniques are still out there that we haven't even put into our vocabulary to unlock a move.
Totally.
And yeah, that's just like that's kind of basic what I did in some ways, but it could be used. Like, I mean, it's not
I mean, because if I was to break that down, I would say like, okay, like what do you need for the movement, right? Like, okay, Josh, you're falling on this move, you're really widespread and it's hard to come in. There's a lot of impact. I just gave you the answer. It's like that left hand coming in is hard to control, right? There's too much swing, you have too much distance, that hand has too much physical impact when you come in, so you cannot hold it anymore, right? Or the accuracy is probably a big impact of it. So what are all the factors that can control that? And it's like momentum is usually a big one and timing is usually a big one. And like, yeah, that's simple at heart, but like, how do you even get to getting your body to do that, right? Because obviously that was intuitive. It's not like you would pre-visualize, you're like, oh, for sure, I'm going to kick my body up. It's like, that just felt what was the easiest way to alleviate impact for your left hand coming in, and it worked, right? And that's actually what comp style climbing mostly is like, okay, I need this. This is what I have. What's the best thing that I should do to get what I needed, right? Based on what I have. And that's like, it sounds like Yosemite Valley climbing is honestly a lot of comp style climbing.
Well, I mean, and I agree with everything you said, but I guess the one thing maybe I don't fully agree with is, like I don't know. I don't want to try to paraphrase you. Basically, why isn't it something that instead of it just being intuition, that someone didn't say to me like, hey, you're trying to alleviate, the momentum here. Well, there's this technique. It's like, oh, there's no heel hook. Oh, there's no toe hook. Oh, there's no foot. Don't worry. like reverse pogo. I don't know what the hell I call it. Can you make up a name for it, Tim? Like, and, like someone comes along and says like, oh, try this. It's because, I mean, that's my little bag of tricks right there. I go, is there a left foot? No. Like, is there a left toe hook? No. Is there a left heel hook? No. Okay, well, now I'm going to like swing my leg wildly so that it takes my momentum away for a split second. And that's seems like actually part of that same line of thinking you're saying, but there's no name for it. No one taught
Right.
me, or no one gave me that beta. And so why isn't that around yet? So I'm just giving you props for saying like there is deeper we can go.
Yeah, dude. Technique. And by the way, that this, I think the opposite of that happens way more in the gym, where people spray exactly what was successful for them, and they're like, yeah, you should just do this because this is what worked for me. And that's like exactly like not what people, I've had sprays from usually climbers like yourself, climbers who've been climbing for a really long time, climber who's sent, 100 V10s or more. And, someone who's done like a million different types of movements where, maybe you don't know the name of that move, but you're like, why don't you try this, And the reason you tell me on a movement, if you watch me struggle and you're like, all right, Tim, you should try this, I think maybe this will work, is because you're analyzing what goes wrong, right? And then telling me a suggestion. And I think climbers generally don't analyze what goes wrong. I think that's a huge flaw in like most climbers. Sorry, I'm a coach. I've coached a lot of people, and the vast majority of the people, if not every single person, needs to work on analyzing what goes wrong. And I see this constantly. This is like the number one pet peeve of mine in climbing gyms is people spraying. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are going to be like, "Oh my god, I hate those sprayers." And the only reason why I hate people spraying is because they don't actually ask themselves like, what am I watching that's going wrong? It's usually people who've like done something and happen to have been successful, but that success doesn't mean you're doing something the correct way. It doesn't mean that you're doing something the optimal way. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything for any good reason. You might just be tall, you might just be strong, you might have just been really lucky, right? And if you cannot explain why what you just did provided success like you just did, where you're like, but I moonkicked, but it allowed this movement to be easier for X, Y, and Z reason, then you can spray, right? Then you can say like, but I did this because it helped with this. And then you can spray to somebody else.
This is what I found interesting when we did that podcast, No Coach, No Problem, basically how to do self-analysis. And we had talked about it a little bit, and you had this argument that was basically what it all comes down to is being able to ask, why it went wrong, why something went wrong, and then what to do about it. It's so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much because we did a podcast on it. But something I think is interesting is I'm going to link it back to the Moonboard, and the reason why is because I was going to tell you that my kryptonite are these black triangle pinches, or sorry, not well. Sometimes pinches, they're crimps, and often, and on top of that, it's when they're Gastones. So there's a lot of like right arm Gastones, which is how I dislocated my shoulder many years ago. And I'm bad on small holds. I'm bad on Gastones. And that's my freaking kryptonite. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is it makes me think about how I view my video, or am I the person who doesn't know what's going wrong? And I actually, hearing you talk about that gives me a little bit of an epiphany where I have this both self-talk and objective reality that I'm not good on those. And for some reason, it makes it hard for me to analyze them dispassionately. I'm like, oh, I suck at those. Oh, I hate those. And so like, I don't know if I'm breaking down my video and looking at where or why I'm failing so well. So that's interesting, Tim. Yeah.
When the first thing I try to correct with people that I coach is their negative language. Everybody has the one thing that they kind of suck at, or the one thing they don't like. For the number one person I heard growing up was Brennan, and like hips. Like if he just like had a high foot, he almost wouldn't even try it. He almost wouldn't even try it before he told you like straight up like that move's gonna be hard for me, like that move's gonna suck, like you guys are gonna shit on this. And it's like, well, it's not about us necessarily. Like you might be right, that's probably true. Like it's gonna be harder for you, and like it's not gonna work as quickly for you as it is gonna work for us, for sure. But is that the best that you can do? Is that the best that you should operate? And like, when I noticed that, like, I mean, he's my friend, so I never like hopped on the opportunity to like correct his language or anything. But when people started paying me for that, I was like, oh yeah, this is a terrible, like, you'll never try hard if you say that about what you think, before you go to, like, the first on the other side of that, the first thing that I coached for, I just did a little training camp with a couple of kids. And the first thing that I coached, and the thing that I coached every single day for 6 hours a day that we did, was belief, right? If you believe in something, it almost doesn't matter if you're correct or incorrect. It doesn't matter, right? If you say like, oh, for sure, I'm going to jump to this hold, two hands, when there's like clearly a heel hook or something, but you don't believe the heel hook and you believe 100% that this jump way will work, which way do you think is going to be more successful most of the time, right? Like, as long as this way is possible, humanly possible, you'll probably do it. Is it more efficient? No, but we can talk about that afterward, right? But the most important thing that you should work on is believing that that something goes, or believing that something works, because you don't realize, I think every climber who's listening can reflect on one time where they're like, oh, I'm just going to go for it more. Like, oh, dude, I fell on the finish jug of something, and you're like, ah, oh, it's a jug. Like, I should have just grabbed it. Like, I could have just believed. And you get there and you don't think about an action that will make your movement better objectively, something that will actually technically make it more optimal. You just believe more, and it usually works. It usually works. So what that means is, if we start from there, if we start from that belief, then we can actually be more objective. We can actually be more technical in our language. Then we can actually analyze, right? But if we can't even get there first, if we can't even start with belief, then I think we're missing out on all these other kind of analyzing things.
That's like the story of me is like,
Sorry,
is like,
kicked my desk.
No worries, I'm too excited. That's not a foothold, Tim. That is like classic story of me just believing more. I mean, it's sometimes it can be to your detriment, although it's the first step, but then being able to take a step back and objectively diagnose your technique. So I do that with those Gastons. I'm just like, I just need to try hard. I just need to like really do it. And that may be step one, but it only gets you so far.
But if you try, if I was like, Josh, here, try the shoulder move, right? And I said, all right, but before you go, let's spend time to actually like talk about your thoughts with it, because your opinions are probably going to be resistant and, more defensive, where you're like, I usually just can't do. Okay, fine. All right, let's just get through that stage, and let's go through the stage of you visualizing the movement and like trying to do it. And for you, before you get on analyzing what physical steps need to happen, that's what, Josh has been sending me videos of him doing stuff on the Moonboard, and he runs through the entire climb verbally. Like, he runs through all of his opinions, all of his anticipations, which is some of my notes later on some actionable steps to do when depending on what climbing your access looks like. But you spend all that time first. You have your opinions, then you have your anticipation, right? Which is what you do every time. But you do that extra on the Gaston movements, right? And then you try 100%. You try your belief. It actually allows you to reflect on that attempt a lot better afterward, right? Where you can say like, okay, this is what I did, and this is what I didn't do, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work. And you can make adjustments according to that, right? Versus like, it just felt like it wasn't going to work. Like, it just feels like this or whatever. Like, if we go always on feeling versus the objective feedback, right? But it's hard to have that objective feedback if we don't have those kind of that setup before, where we're like, all right, but I already know that I'm going to try 100%. I already know that this is what I think works and what doesn't work. And then you try, and it's always easier to analyze afterward.
Well, it's like that makes it more like a science experiment. You're saying like, you're setting up like, this is my hypothesis, and then I'm going to actually try hard and see what happens. It's something that also reminded me of is being willing to try different methods, even if you have success. Like, this is kind of goes back to like Carlo talking about doing the same thing multiple times, or doing the same problem multiple times in different ways, or perfecting it. So I just did this one where there was a Gaston, and there's a Gaston, and I reached up above. It was and I flashed it. And so I read it, I flashed it, but then the way I did the Gaston is I kept my arm basically straight and kind of just yarded on it and reached up, with a high foot, and just kind of did that like lean back, more straight arm. And in the video I had watched before someone doing it, they had really locked that down, kept their more statically, like kept their hand by their chest. So as soon as I got off, I recognized how I did it, where I kind of like did my straight arm thing, avoided the lock off, because I'm more of like a jumpy, not so isolated static climber. And so I got on and just tried that move, doing it statically, and I did it. And I'm not going to say one was better than the other. It was just, I just wanted to understand what the move felt like this other way, because each one was valid. And I was just checking in with myself, like, why did
Yeah.
I choose this? And what
Such a
else was
good point.
available? It felt really
Yeah.
good. It felt really cool to do, actually. I was like, I should
Yeah.
do this more instead of just trying to tick the benchmark, you know?
Yeah, the amount of times I've done that, and usually I think I am looking for like, all right, well, I got to see which one's better then, like obviously I do that a lot. Also, where on the shoulder moves, I like kind of unload the position and then use momentum to like load back into it, just because some depending on like how far the foot is, how good the foot is, how high it is, like that dictates like how much I can isolate that shoulder position. So sometimes I can't isolate the shoulder position as easily depending on what my other arm was as well. So then I might have to unload. And then if I need distance as well, then I have to like recreate momentum. So yeah, I'll generally do it both ways. And then I am looking for what way is better, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point, right? The point isn't for what's better. The point is just to teach yourself that another way is likely possible. And that affects your, like, it's the whole opinion pyramid, like what does your base opinion look like? When you say that hold is bad and I say that hold is good, how far are we from each other? Right, or vice versa, right? And like that's something that a client of mine, Caleb, said. He's like, I had kind of an epiphany too. Like when Tim says jug, like I don't think it's just what jug means for him. Like, and it for him that just means what he can do with it, right? And like so, just try to like widen your opinion pyramid of like what you think is actually a jug. Like you'll see this constantly. Comp team kids, like comp climbers, will grab holds on the wall and not jugs. They're just gonna, like, that's a jug, like that's a jug. And it's like, first of all, you guys are idiots, but second of all, you guys are really confident and I see what you're doing and that really helps you, right? But those are not jugs. But there's a difference between like the objective, like, oh, I can see it, what this hold is, but also your opinion, like what do you think you can do off that hold? Because if you don't think you can do much, you need to work on that, right? Where you need to like study it and try more, and then you'll have stronger opinions about it. Actually was going to say that earlier. The moonboard is so interesting to me. I've noticed this a lot more just watching you climb on it, where you grab the same holds, but you do different movements on them a lot. So your intimacy with each hold and your opinions on each hold only gets better and better. The first time I ever climbed on a moonboard or a kilter board, a tension board, it wasn't amazing sessions. I was just climbing for fun. But now when I climb on most of those boards, I know exactly like what climbs to try and like what they're gonna, supposed to feel like, and like how hard I'm supposed to try on each movements, and like what each, I can sequence the climb so much faster. I can fall and like know exactly what I should, orient my hand a little bit differently if I want to have success. I also know when I can't do a movement a lot quicker, just because I already know all the things that I've tried on it. Bad opinion language. Pro tip: don't say I can't do something. That's my pro tip. Don't say you can't do something, because you should check it. A coach that I work with used to say, prove to me you can't do a move, not that you can. Prove to me you can't do it. So try all the ways. Show yourself, show me you can't do the move. And I really like that. That was Justin Cubbage. He's from the Bay Area.
Yeah. We should. I just have like one more thing on the on the moonboard.
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
we'll
you can
on.
see, well, because we go so deep, because it gives you this little microcosm to go deep on, and that was like this big epiphany I had during my first venture on the moonboard in the 2019 set during the pandemic. Is I realized I don't know if I've ever gone this deep. I'm not a big projector. It's like I go deep in climbing, but how intimately familiar I became with each hold, and
Right.
that angle, and what was possible. One thing I've been noticing is just really interesting, because it has to do with the grades on the moonboard. And I'll do a climb, and sometimes it'll be unbelievably easy, sometimes it'll be really hard. And I watch videos, often like beta videos, and I watch these beta videos, and it blows me away. Two things blow me away. They often think something is easy that's really hard, because they get so strong at jumping and latching stuff. It's like that's their go-to, their feet cut on every single move, and they get used to that, and they just think something that's actually pretty darn hard is easy. And I will say that even though I'm all about keeping my feet on, I am good at jumping and catching things. That is an ability that I've always had. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's climbs where you can just keep your feet on and people don't. And that makes the climb pretty freaking easy. And it just,
Right.
I think I said that to you in some of my videos that I broke down, where I just was watching someone do it and their feet were cutting for no reason. And like why? And so to me, this is where I think it's funny. Like the grades, it's like, okay, this is a V8. It's like, well, when you just jump and cut on everything, it actually is more like a V9 or a V10. And if you keep your feet on for everything, it's actually more like a V6. And
Mm-mm.
it's just hilarious to me that the grades almost, it doesn't work for either way to do it. And so somehow you just settle in the middle. I don't know if you've noticed that, but people
Dude,
just do
oh my
not
God.
keep their feet on. Come
That
on.
was just fascinating listening to you kind of explain it because I've always had this like feeling in the back of my head when I'm like, I wonder I wonder why people give the grade they give because like I tend to have as much of a all-inclusive view on style as possible when I'm grading things. I try to have as much of a view on if you climbed this grade, what would it feel like to you? And I try to have as much of a view on what is the best possible techniques to climb this thing the best way. And so every time I climb something, I try to pay attention to these things. And I don't think most people do. I doubt most people do, right? And so when I'm climbing on the boards, I tend to like categorize the climb just from sequencing it right away, like what style it is, right? Like you tend to like look at moonboard climbs and you're like, all right, this one's got a lot of holds on it. It's going to be a very specific like a root style, and like this other one's got 3 holds on it. They're all slopers. It's going to be a jumpy style one, like and I tend to categorize them as like the comp style climber one, the rock climber one, and then the board climber one. And the board climber ones tend to always be for me the most sandbag ones. The rock climber ones for me always tend to be the easiest ones. Like I'll climb V10s and V11s that I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? Who's grading this a double digit and trying to get double digits out of this? Like if you just had good technique, then you could there's so many ways to bypass all these hard movements that you're doing, right? And that's exactly what you're saying. And then vice versa, where like these guys are so strong that for me, I'm trying to use my technique and trying to use something on some climb and it doesn't work. That's not the way you do the climb, right? But do these guys actually understand like how metrics relate, how they correlate to grade? That's for me, like it's not so much the other way around. I don't mind doing climbs where I'm like, oh, I found the better technique and I think it's softer, right? Because that's a way easier thing to argue with people versus like, I don't know, man, like you're jumping one arm to this crimp and then campusing to the next one. How many V7 climbers can do that? Like how many? Like did you climb V7 at the gym anywhere or outside but you were able to do that type of stuff? Like no, you obviously can do, I absolutely personally hate, and I hope some of you guys relate to this. Like, I hate the grading where it's kind of like, you can only climb this V7 if you climb V10. I hate that. That's not what grades, like, I think were meant for a lot of people. That's not why there's such a variety of like style and grades. And like, that's why grades are trying to be related to, this V7 should not be harder than that V6, or it should not be harder than that V8, and it shouldn't be easier than this V6. There's a reason for that. And we always grew up with this philosophy in the gyms, right? Like when we were setting, I know you were taught this also, or like it was important in your setting culture to maintain the integrity of the grades, right? We talked about this before where like, dude, if it's 10B, you're trying to set a 10B, make sure it's 10B. And I think going back to all of that, like the grades, yeah, you brought up grades. Grades just piss me off so much just because like where they come from, right? They're always a consensus and people are allowed to say whatever the hell they want.
Yeah,
You know?
Tristan, Jamie, what do you think about Moonboard grades? Let's let us know. We'll bring you on, and it makes me think of our favorite climb to talk about, Rasta Man vibrations and lucid dreaming, where the Rasta Man is the stand. And I actually, I don't know if Jared actually graded it when he did it. In the book it was V12, but I'm pretty sure no one had ever done that move who hadn't done lucid dreaming. Like it's like this V12 move that you can only do if you're a V16 climber. Because I think we were joking
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Dave. I don't know if that made it on the pod either, about how lucid dreaming is this V15 that only V16 climbers have done, and you you just wonder. Oh, dude, that also reminds me. I was looking at Black Beauty. So just actually a little behind the scenes of how obsessed I am on the Moonboard is I'm in there doing my training, doing my like, oh, I need to, do some pull-ups and some pistols and, some fingerboard today. And between my sets, I have my Moonboard right there. And so what I do is I scroll through all the climbs I haven't done yet,
Oh,
fondle
nice.
the holds. Like, can I do this? Yeah. Oh yeah, I think I can do. Okay. Like, just, I don't know. It's like, I'm that obsessed. So I was looking at Black Beauty, which is that famous V13, and it I think it's I think it's a lucid dreaming simulator,
Dude,
dude.
no way you're just now discovering
I
that.
didn't know I didn't know this. Okay, well,
It's an undercling to a vertical pinch to a big
yeah.
jump.
Damn. Okay, that's just embarrassing. Then that was common knowledge, but yeah, that's kind of cool. Maybe then, if maybe this will be fun, I'll work on it, and it'll give me some kind of inspiration that maybe I could do lucid dreaming. Probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't climb like anywhere similar because you do the move on Lucid. On Lucid, you do the move to the pinch with a left foot on, and that creates balance and that creates a really nice perch stance, or allows you to create drive in a specific way. But this also the undercling on Black Beauty is like 5 times deeper and bigger than the
Yeah,
Lucid hold, but the pinch is also like a bit further and like weirder to crank on. I think it's a great trainer in that way that Dave was talking about, where like the position is still like just as weird. It's just as weird. It's a totally different move, but it's just as weird. And it's definitely a great trainer for Lucid, but it's also
okay.
like, yeah, it's got to be a Lucid sim.
It totally okay. Tim, we gotta get off this. Well, last thing I'll say is, if anyone out there, I'm clearly diving deep on 2016. I've been recording my sends, but I haven't really done anything with it. And if anyone out there wants to follow along, yeah, I'm still kind of trying to decide what to do. I could put them on YouTube. I don't know if I want to do Instagram again. There's something about Instagram that's really ephemeral. They just kind of disappear after you put it on.
Mm.
But I've also been toying around with doing live sessions, or live streaming it, and then talking to people, like keeping me company while I'm by myself in my dark garage all alone. So yeah, if anyone listening has any ideas or would follow me along with a live stream or wants me to do a YouTube channel, yeah, I'm definitely committed to trying to do all 542. There's only one guy I've seen on the rankings who's done them all. It's I'm blank. It's Vadim. It's that burly Russian
Oh,
guy.
yeah. Vadim
And
Timonov or
yeah, God, he's
yeah,
strong,
okay.
dude. That guy is
He's
just.
crazy strong.
And I think our number one right now is Austin Purdy in
Oh,
the
nice.
U.S. He's done like, I don't know, 539 or something. And I'm looking at
Oh,
them.
wow.
I'm like, can I crack that? So we'll get into this later. That's actually kind of one of my goals. As I'm kind of doing a little goal setting, and I'm getting older, and I'm like, okay, like I want to do them all. And I'll use this to say goodbye to our moonboard section that became way more epic and long than I thought we were just going to share
Yeah.
what we're climbing about. And Tim, you said you aren't in Salt Lake anymore, and where you doing? Where are you? Where's Timothy Kang right now?
Dude, okay, I want to get into that, but I will. I also want to close that moonboard segment. I'm not going to talk about the moonboard, but I will say that I have a lot of questions. I'm learning just from having that rant and discussion about your opinions on the moonboard, and we have a Patreon that you guys can join. Just gonna shamelessly plug it here. If you guys want to join and you join that second tier, the LFG tier, you can join our classroom. And that's where I'm going to pick Josh's brain a lot about the moonboard. So if you guys you guys disagreed or got angry about anything that I said or Josh said or we said, bring it up in the AMA classroom if you guys want to join. But you have to be a LFG tier subscriber.
And LFG stands for Let's Fucking Go.
Let's fucking
And
go.
if and like come in with your videos of your climbs. Like, I mean, that's the whole thing. Is I don't know. We have Tim, when this one airs, we're gonna have already done our last classroom session. So you guys sign up so you can get in on the next one. I think we have like a dozen people. Like the whole point is that you get to come and show us, like, ask us, okay, I heard you saying this. I understand that principle, but how do I apply it? And climbing is so complex that we kind of have to speak in principles, but we understand that it's not always simple to apply that to your situation. But also, just newsflash, applying it to your own situation actually often helps other people. So that unique thing that you think you have, getting to talk through it with us will probably help everyone else there. But yeah, it's supposed to be an intimate, smaller setting. And if you have a specific moonboard climb, me and Tim have probably tried it or hopefully done it. And uh, bring those questions. We love to go in deep on this stuff, and just it's
Yeah.
also fun to get to meet everyone. Like it's a pleasure. So thanks for that. Thanks for that little plug there, Tim. Now that
Yes.
shortens
Back
my
to it.
announcement section.
Nice.
Yeah,
Hell
Tim, what
yeah.
are you doing? What's going on in your life? I'm only on the moon board, but you're a traveler. You're doing fun things. Where are you at, Tim?
Yeah, life's been crazy. I actually today I'm also driving to Salt Lake City, but I was gonna film a vlog today and for the next throughout the weekend because I'm going to Lander for the International Climbers Fest. So maybe I'll have seen a couple of you guys there. But I moved to Vegas. I've lived in Salt Lake City for 3 years. I grew up mostly in the Bay Area, and during COVID, I hit the road, was homeless for X amount of months, and then settled in Salt Lake. And for no good reason other than I wanted to climb in a place that I knew a lot of people climbed. I wanted to live somewhere cheap, and I wanted good access to climbing gyms. And I think after a while, all that started to, like, the novelty of it fizzled away, and I was like more asking myself what I wanted out of my life, and where I wanted to be, and all this stuff. And just with the relationship that I'm in with my girlfriend Michaela, like we were lucky enough to have her dad loan us money to buy a house. So we bought a house here in Vegas. So long term, it's going to be a lot of work and a lot. But that's kind of the life that I was also stoked to try to go towards. But I have a lot of outdoor climbing. I have a lot of other. I don't have great gym access, but I want to build a home wall, and I just want to. I don't know. I want to study myself as a climber a little bit more than just like go to the gyms and be a person all the time. And don't get me wrong, podcasting and vlogging and Instagram is all going to still be there. And I'm still going to work on myself as a social climber. But, all this, theory and principles in climbing and, all the stuff and deep level mastery and obsession, I feel like I haven't had a chance to do that as much while I've been in Salt Lake City, which is weird because it was kind of the big reason why I moved there. But I think just like, there's too many distractions for me there. There's too many things to focus on. And here, there's hard climbing, which is also really, really important. Is having access to hard climbing around you is really important. I want to send multiple V14s and harder, and maybe Jumbo Love.
Name some, yeah, dude. Say, put out that bucket tick list. Although I know
Yeah,
that, I mean, this is something we talked about, offline, was not necessarily knowing your exact goals yet, but yeah, what are some things in the area that are inspiring to you?
yeah.
Sport, bouldering,
Uh,
trad.
tr-
No.
Probably trad actually. I think Rainbow Wall is like getting some projects and some pretty hard multi-pitch projects. It's like a 2,000-foot wall in the back in the canyons. It's amazing looking, and I haven't gone yet. So I'll definitely trad climb with BD supporting me. Also, it's really nice to like get into it because they really care about
I just bought
people getting into trad.
my full rack from BD, colorful and ready to
Sheesh.
be plugged in. Yeah.
Nice. For boulders, I think my immediate bouldering project is going to be Trieste. I tried Trieste probably 5 different sessions, and it felt like a really anti-style boulder for me at that time. I think I hadn't tried it in 3 years, maybe longer. But I couldn't really get that close on it. And then after I stopped trying it, it felt like immediately a lot of my friends had sent it like back to back to back, and the sit start. And I was like, damn, like I really should like have been able to do that thing, and I should go and try to do that thing. So I think that's going to be first for me just because it's kind of a nemesis rig. But there are some climbs that I think would maybe not give me as much trouble, like Kintsugi, which is a V15, or I think the Nest maybe wouldn't feel so hard.
Oof.
I do want to
Sorry.
try Sleepwalker and Squoze.
Um, dude, Kintsugi for some reason just super attractive to me. I am going to call you. I am going to put on my villain or sheriff hat and say that Tim, I think Kintsugi is now V13, pretty
Okay.
settled on it. So I want to see you taking that V15 grade, and Tristan will yell at you. He'll call up and say,
I
you
know. I
know,
think, and by the way, the reason for that is because I think it was put up as V15 and it wasn't argued, but beta was found that was a lot
yeah,
easier.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It bypasses like 3 of the crux movements where you can just like flick a toe hook on instead of doing all these crimp moves. I still want to do it both ways, to be honest. They both look amazing. And people still standard like sometimes can't do the toe hook catch, so have to kind of do it this V15 way. And I think, I'll just see what works for me. And it's an amazing looking boulder. It's this amazing belly proud. It's pretty tall, but it's got a good landing. You jump to this start hold that's just like a perfect looking ledge. And it just looks like amazing climbing, amazing ledges, like bad looking crimps and cool moves. I think it just looks like an amazing boulder. But there's definitely a fair amount of climbs in the 12 to 13 range that I still haven't sent here. So it'd be nice to start the season off maybe with a couple of random, little excursions, but Trieste will 100% be my focus. And I think if I can get out to Jumbo Love before the season starts, if I can get a partner or something, I'll go and try it. Just so I can like get started on it and get the moves dialed, and then maybe come back to try to send it in the late spring or something next year.
Dude, drag one of those BD athletes with you. I feel like Carlo would be psyched. I don't know. I just would love to see you sieging that with one of your fellow athletes. I mean, I know Seb went out there. I wouldn't say he sieged it.
Yeah,
He just cruised it. But Jumbo Love is kind of special, man.
yeah,
Yeah, and you really
it's
have a lot of sport climbers based in Las Vegas too. You should.
totally, yeah,
There is a scene there. It's funny. It's like not talked about a lot. How Las Vegas may be one of the best locations to be a climber. There's year
yeah,
round climbing. Great airport. There we go. Airport.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Cheap living. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good
yeah.
spot, man.
Yeah, and lastly, there's a couple of walls that I have never really heard of or been to that are just being put up. I didn't know that Joe Kinder lived here. He's a good friend of mine, and we have climbed together in Rifle. And I pretty much just want to climb with him as much as I can, I think, for the next couple of months. So he just posted a picture on his story or his close friends or something that had a bunch of new lines and projects on some cool limestone walls. So right now in the summer. So there's like 4 or 5 walls that you can climb in the summer that are really good in Vegas. So I think right after this Lander thing, I'll come back and just hit them up and be like, all right, let's go. I'll just try to get fit on the rock, on the limestone, because right now I don't have, the gym for me is 25 minutes away from my house. So, Red Rocks is 20 minutes. It's closer to go to Red Rocks, but it's too hot to go there. 25 minutes for me is like a little bit of a stretch to go to the gym, daily. So I definitely want to build a home wall, but I might just go outside, I think, like every other day and just try to climb a bunch.
Dude, go soak in that wisdom from Joe. That guy
Yeah.
has been there, done that, lived the life. Dude, his FAs, I don't even, do you know that or hold on, I feel like I should Wikipedia this, or uh, I'm pretty sure he FA'd Roses and Blue Jays, which is one of the coolest V13s in the East. Like it's just this
Really?
classic. Yeah,
It's got
hold
that
on.
big jump move to the lip.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up right now.
That climb looks amazing. That climb looks like one of the best V13s of all time.
All right, I don't know. I can't find it super quickly. Yeah, who did the FA? I really want to say Joe did that. If I'm wrong, God, dude, it's so crazy when you look up. I'm like looking up climbs, looking it up, and it's like Jimmy Webb, V13, Flash, like Roses and Blue
Oh my
Jays. So
god.
like, you're just that was in 2012. Jesus.
Wow.
Anyways, I could be wrong there, but the fact that uh, I even think that Joe did that just goes to show that Joe has been so prolific in just helping us all have amazing hard climbing. And yeah, dude, that the scene out there, you're gonna just get to meet a whole different type of climber, and I'm excited to see what you have going, or not just what you have going, but where it's gonna make you head. So,
Yeah, I'll update you
congrats, man.
guys for
Yeah,
sure as we go. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, excited
yeah.
for this new change in life.
Okay, Tim. Dude, I didn't realize we would just go so deep into what we've been doing, but that's okay. Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about David Fitzgerald? Let's talk about him a bit, because I just I don't know, when I got off that pod, actually right in the middle of the pod, I had this moment that I have sometimes where I'm like, oh, this is good. Like, oh, like I will say it took a little bit to warm up, but that's kind of how it always is for all of us. It's just it always takes a moment for us to have these great conversations, and then to really drop in and get the most out of both us and the guest. And when Dave was also, I don't know, he's humble. He's quiet. He's not going to just sit there and tell you, I did this 8C and this, and I flashed this, and I'm so strong. But the truth is people like that got there because of their deep introspection, their heart, their work ethic. And so they have that wealth of knowledge. And that's kind of our job, is to pull it out of them. And when it started coming, oh my God, dude, there was just so many amazing gems that I just, yeah, I really liked it. And I've got a couple of highlights, but was there anything for you, Tim, that just stood out about Dave?
Yeah. No, it was well said. I think I have 3 points that I kind of wanted to talk about from the podcast, but I just wanted to kind of echo what you said, because Dave was, for me, a very interesting guest to have because, usually I think the other guests are higher profile for sure, and that makes it easier to like pick and choose questions to ask from, and like pick an experience that they've had that you definitely know about, and kind of try to get a twist on it. And it felt harder to do that, but it allowed us to ask him more, to like open up about his philosophies and like where they came from. It was pretty clear. I mean, he luckily shared enough videos that you and I could get a sense that those came from a very specific place, and not just like you didn't steal that training plan from somebody else. You didn't do what somebody else told you to do. You heard somebody else like guide you in life and in climbing, and you were like, okay, that's really interesting, and then took that to climbing, tried really, really, really hard, and learned things that you didn't have, and you needed to grow in that way. But first and foremost, the thing that struck me about Dave is that he has a philosophy to follow. I think I kind of said this in astonishment in the podcast, that he had so many names, like so much history and so many people to respect in his past. And that allows you to learn the most from them, allows you to really take in like how people have seen life, and you just acknowledge that people have seen more life than you and seen more climbing life than you. And that's really, really important. Like we've been talking about, it's really important in this game to just like have grabbed more holds and have just tried more moves and just to fallen more. And that allows you to have better perspective if you want to take it. Not everyone. I know climbers who climbed 20 plus years and still don't pay attention, but if they have, then you might as well ask them a lot of questions and learn from them. But whether he creates his own or follows those he's respected in the past, he sees art, style, and philosophy in climbing and embraces it in his choices. I think that's, for me, like a big, you can tell that for Dave, it's like a deep philosophy, and there's an art and there's a style aspect, as a part of it. And he tries not only to embrace and continue the legacy on of those before him that he's really respected, but he twists it, right? He twists it for his own, and allows it to really show in his own way. Another note that I wrote was to be creative in the training. I think that's something that Dave really wanted to emphasize is, Dave learned from specific things that he thought he needed on specific movements, on specific projects. And that just turned into teaching himself to be comfortable with a previous discomfort. And he taught himself how it applied on the wall. And, I really like that, what he was saying, where it's like, I would just go and try something. I had a theory about how something would work, and then I would try it, observe what I didn't have, and I'd go to the gym and theorize again. It was very similar to what John Cardwell was saying, except that like he was talking about in bouldering and John was talking about in sport climbing, which are honestly completely different approaches, right? You still have to pay attention. And, John's thing also was a huge epiphany that I had in sport climbing growth, right? I told you in the lead World Cups, I did the exact same thing. I trained a super heavy aerobic base, but really what you needed was probably to be more comfortable climbing in an anaerobic base, so that when the boulder problems showed up, it worked out better that way, right? And the last note that I wrote on Dave, a note that he had said was train positions. This teaches us far more awareness in climbing. It's something that, you and I were just diving way deep on for the Moonboard, is like understanding that awareness is huge. And for Dave, it's something that I haven't done, which is holding hard positions. That sounds kind of, for me, unintuitive to train in that way, but it makes a lot of sense, right? You can really feel what's working. Why are you even holding that position, right? And generally, like, I don't know how many times Ross and I will have session on the board, and I'll point it out to Ross, that something he just did on the board, and I'm like, dude, you just spanned like the craziest span, and I'm like, and he's like, oh, really? And I'll be like, look at the wall. Your foot was there and your hand was there. And he's like, wow. And I'm like, go up and like try that position again. And usually you can't, like, in the moment when you're really trying hard, you don't really know what's going on. So having that awareness is huge, I think, for, and also with the vice versa of that, like maybe not doing that and going super aggressive in a way, I think is also another way to balance that. And which is what I do. But I would for sure start training positions and holding isometrics in positions. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that positions versus strength thing for Dave. That you started off by using that word perspective. I remember hearing Dave talk about the perspective he gained from his early years in Ireland and seeing the different climbers, and also it was cool that people took him under their wing. It's just, I don't know, it's something I don't think is done enough now, and it could be with the growth of the sport, but just having someone who's experiencing, hey, like, I see you're psyched, like, I'm going to encourage that and teach you, and then climbing with that whole California crew with Jimmy, and he said that opens up his perspective. Although it sounds like he's opening up some of Jimmy's perspective too. You know, with Dave's really strong fingers. I'm not going to say Jimmy doesn't have really strong fingers, but
Right.
you know, I mean, let's just face it. At that top level, there's different things that we all showcase, and Dave may have you know, ability to look at a hold and say, actually, we can lock that off. And you know, maybe Jimmy wouldn't. I just hate speaking for Jimmy because I'm just wrong. But I'm just going to say one might hear that and see what Dave was thinking, and it now shifts his partner's understanding of what may be possible. And so I love that perspective. And to go on the other side, is that's kind of the more, I don't know, meta zoomed out thing. But dude, what Dave really showed me was how granular he went, just down to the freaking nitty gritty, and it kind of got me. So one of the reasons I was interested in talking to Dave is because small holds are my weakness. And
Me
what
too.
Dave is
Yeah.
really good at is that like super isolating, you know, locking off like micro crimpers. And I was like, damn, like Dave, with our powers combined, we could do it. He doesn't even need my powers. But you know, so I was really keen on hearing, you know, what's your secret sauce, right? Like, and what I heard is just going to every little detail and pulling back each layer. And he talked about being fascinated by how each hold, what's the best way to hold a hold. And then in his training, talking about, you know, dealing with rotation, and you know, feeling each finger on the hangboard, and the why behind the rotation was really interesting to me, because he wanted to make sure that as he fatigued, he didn't come out from the wall. Because when we talked about small holds, he didn't talk about strength, he talked about technique and the technique of climbing on small holds. And just all of that made me look at my training and my thought process around small holds. And I'm like, okay, Josh, like go hang on some small holds. Like what you need to do is just hang on small holds. And it's like, yes, Josh, like spend time. I've actually really kind of committed to finger training. Uh, but that's going to get me somewhere, but that's not what the amazing abilities of Dave came from. It's like, okay, that's like level one. Okay, now let's like peel off every little minutia of how to climb on small holds and then how to train on small holds. And it's not just like go hang on small holds. It's like, yeah, of course, now what? You know, and you know, we're about good to great, not just good. And hang on small holds might make you good, but it's not going to make you David Fitzgerald.
Yeah, definitely he tries to look outside the box in why training things matter. And like, you know, he definitely didn't just it seemed like he put his head down and just grinded, but every time he did grind, there had to be a reason for it. And I just respect that. I think that that is super, super cool. And the last thing I want to say about Dave, unless you have more to add, is his optimism, man. Like, you know, I think I had a huge wake up call personally, just listening to him talk, because, you know, he's someone who started off at, you know, 18, 19 years old and maintained this kid-like optimism and kid-like positivity and kid-like fun, you know, for, he's not a kid, he's 30, you know, and like you can just, but you can tell that climbing to him is like more important as like a kid-like activity than to most kids that I see nowadays. And, you know, in our sport and our generation, I just have to share personally, you know, with as much media attention, you know, how much media is important and how much sponsors are important, how much winning competitions are important, how much ascending V12 and harder is important. Like you kind of get lost and you don't have as much fun with that granular detail. And I used to, you know, like I definitely used to until a certain point, and that just kind of woke me up. I was like, dude, like F this stuff with media. Let's just go climb. Like, let's get, you know, stronger at climbing. And you can still include it in media, you know, share on the Testpiece podcast. I'm talking to myself, you know, but like still focus on like, you know, discovering, right? Because climbing isn't discovered yet. And we have to do our part as, you know, strong climbers, as pioneers of the sport, you know, 50 years later after it started or wherever, 60 years later after it started, we're still on the hunt to discovering optimal and mastering climbing.
Well, and I love what you said, and I think Dave is bringing that love and optimism into media with his work on A Little Life, and I think we gave some teasers about upcoming people he's working with, and it's just going to get better and better. Well, I thought I was done talking about Dave, but you reminded me two things. The first one is that he talked about loving the process, like that long term view, and it's actually going to inform a little bit about what we talk about in our next segment, because it kind of made me feel better about putting down some goals around specific climbs. And while that may seem different than what he's saying, he's like, love the process. It's not just about, sending, but he, in that same breath, he talked about how if it's not a hard process, then that's why the send probably won't mean much. And just that the harder, the more effort you put in on that long term, the more happiness you'll get at the end. I'm not saying I don't get a lot of happiness from sending, but I did want to, I wanted to try stretching myself into a harder goal, and banging my head against the wall, training for it, and seeing what that's like, and seeing if I have like more meaning coming out of loving the long term process. And then I'm not saying that means that the send will be what it's all about, just that there's something to diving in deep and trusting the process, and trying hard. And yeah, so thank you, Dave, for that. And the last thing I'm going to say is, dude, this Tahoe scene, this California scene, I'm just going to call this right now with no reason, but just a guess. I'm going to argue that the Sierras and the Tahoe, like especially like the South Lake thing that's going on right now, is kind of a modern day Boulder, Colorado development of like the Alpine and the Front Range. Like these guys are up there. They're really strong. They're hiking. They're finding amazing stuff. There's limitless rock, and right now it's kind of like under wraps. Like it doesn't get talked about that much. It's only like this smaller crew. But I just have this hunch that's like, this is what Dave Graham was doing in Boulder. I don't know how long ago that was, a long time ago. And those guys are just, they're off. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. With a crew that talented and that motivated and doing so much to develop this place, my hunch is in 5 or 10 years, people will turn around and say like, whoa, there's that much there. Okay, we need to go and get on these now iconic 15s or 12 and up. And so just that's my what is it, my guess for the future. That's my bet, is that we're now Tahoe is now the new Front Range. I don't know, I'm not gonna make that big a statement, but
Nice. I was gonna say something on that, but I'm gonna keep it to myself because it sounds uneducated.
Or is it just we're not allowed to share that stuff because it's super special? Okay. Yeah, let's get into it. I do want to, you already did some of the announcement stuff I was going to do, but I just want to take the time to give a shout out to some of our initial Patreon subscribers. Pedro Garcia was our first one in the LFG tier, and just wanted to say thank you. And he's been sending me great questions, and just wanted to take the time to give him a shout out. David Smith was our first one on the normal or the other tier, and I've texted with him, and he's just so psyched, and I just love seeing that. I wanted to take the time to say thank you to you guys, and I'll keep it short, but sign up for our newsletter, get those pro tips straight to your inbox, hear about our upcoming classrooms and what we're talking about there. If you like what we're doing, please drop us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Those are always just help people find us, and it makes us feel good.
Thanks to you guys. Thanks to you guys who are subscribed already. Woo! Let's get more of you.
Yeah. Okay, Tim. We've been talking the Moonboard. We've been talking what's been going on in life, because it's just too fun to talk to you. But we should get to our topic of the day. Maybe it won't be as long as normal, but it really goes hand in hand with everything we've been talking about. And it's around, we're going to say, maximizing what you have, or maximizing what you got. And we talked about this, where we all have these constraints when it comes to the walls available to us, whether that's outdoors, indoors, home wall, quality of gym. Like, when I was living in San Francisco, I had great indoor gyms and they were close to me. I didn't have room for a home wall, and actual rock climbing was really far away. So it's like you always kind of like trade one for the other. And to me, it's like just this recognition of fundamentally having constraints, but how you deal with that in terms of the goals you have, you know, could be, I want to win a World Cup or climb 513, or maybe it's like, I just want to climb cool things that are aesthetic. And so, you know, me and Tim were sharing our, you know, our future goals with each other. And, you know, Tim was talking about his move and what's available to him now or not available. And what happened is that it turned out we had really different answers as to how to maximize, you know, what is available for you. And so we just thought it'd be fun to kind of share our different approaches, and hopefully one of them resonates with you all out there to, you know, achieve your goals by utilizing what you actually have available to you. And yeah, that's it, Tim.
Yeah.
What do you think? You want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think maximizing what you have in terms of access and, you know, um, access to, in terms of like how much climbing gym access you have, because, you know, let's face it, the gym is probably the best place to train if you want to work on your fundamentals as a climber, if you want to build your bases, if you want to just get sheer volume that's like controlled, you know, because if you're going outside, you're kind of just climbing what's outside, for one, which is, you know, how much hiking do you have to do to get, you know, as much variety that you want, and
Wait,
then how hard is the climbing that you have.
Tim, I'm interrupting you because this is exactly where I don't agree. So I'm gonna let you keep on going, but this is where I think that your goals are really important to talk about, and this is where I think you don't agree with me. But so, you know, this idea of the outdoors, and is it or is the indoors better training? It's like, yeah, I would say physically it is, maybe, but what if your goal is that climb outdoors, or what if you just want to climb on limestone? And so all right, I just interrupted. I was a dick. I'm
Totally.
sorry.
No, I like what you're saying. I do like what you're saying. You know, obviously people have climbed super hard things in the past with no climbing gym access ever. You know, obviously if you want to climb that one climb, you might as well just like beat your head against the wall on that one climb, and you probably can get up that one climb. But, you know, I have a feeling that most people, you know, who listen to this podcast care about, you know, getting better at climbing and like mastering climbing as a whole, you know. And so like if you want to do that, if that's one underlying part of your goal, you're probably climbing in the gym. And if you're not, then you probably have a specific mental approach, or like a general approach to climbing outside. So more what I was saying was, not so much that you should climb in the gym. I'm just saying that I think most people probably would climb in the gym a lot. But that's an assumption. You know, I think you're right. I think, you know, a lot of people probably could favor climbing just outside, just on that one problem that they want to get done. But I have a feeling that people care about more mastery in climbing in general, and like learning climbing in general. And that's, in my opinion, probably best done in the gym, just based on like objective, you know, what do you have in the gym and what do you have outside? You just have more access to climbing in the gym. You have way more climbing that you can do in the gym, way more variety, and just way more variety in terms of style, hand, you know, grips that you have, like angles and difficulty, right? You don't have that variety in almost any, actually, period. That is an objective fact. You cannot have as much access to variety outside as you can inside. You just have way more. And that's kind of what I mean is like, so depending on that access, but also every gym has a different level of access, right? Depending on that access, you know, what can you do and what do you want to do? That's kind of the biggest thing that I was trying to set up with that.
Well, and so yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like half joking where me and Tim are totally at odds, and you know, we probably are going to meet in the middle. And actually, so here's the tension here is, I'm going to talk a little bit about my goals in climbing that I've recently set, and what Tim is kind of getting at is that fundamentally what you want to do to climb climbs is get better at climbing, and this is like a really general statement, and I kind of have always really agreed with that approach, because typically my goal has been, I want to climb the climbs I want to climb. Like, I want to climb cool shit. And really, when you'll hear about my bucket list, like literally what will happen is I'll see a picture of a climb, and I'll just think, oh, that one, like that climb. And
totally.
It's like, oh, well, that's like a 60-meter tufa route. And I'm like, yeah. It's like, well, Josh, like you're on a moonboard. And it's like, yeah. And then I see a boulder and I'm like, that climb. It's like, Josh, that's like a 3-move boulder. Like that's not a 60-meter tufa route. I'm like, I know. I want to climb cool shit. And so where, you know, I basically fundamentally really agree with Tim here is his thing is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's like you have these tools available to you, and sometimes it's just a 5-foot home wall. Sometimes it's Seiyus. Sometimes it's, you know, an amazing gym, and whatever the case may be. And Tim was trying to show me that you need to utilize those tools, and we will talk about some maybe actual concrete ways to do that, to make yourself a better climber, so that whether it's a 60-meter tufa route or a 6-foot you know, crimpy boulder, that you are able to accomplish it, because fundamentally you're a good climber. And when we look at the top climbers, that's what we see. You see Almondra climbing, you know, flashing Jade, and then flashing Super Krakenet, and then doing Silence, or, you know, that Project Big, where it's like, you know, it's big. It's a long climb. And what's the consistent thing there? It's all freaking climbing. And Almondra is really good at climbing. And it wasn't that he was like, okay, I need to do just endurance training for this climb, which I'm sure that's part of it. But that's, Tim, that's I think that's your fundamental point, is that down deep, you want to be better at climbing, and then you will figure, you know, that's the base of the pyramid.
Yeah. Click it. End. Mic drop. That was the podcast. That's good. I mean, basically, yes. Here's my like philosophies for just, here's my understandings. I've, you know, gone out to try to send my projects. I've put 1,000 tries in climbs before. I put more than 5-10 sessions and stuff as well. I've spent my head beaten at climbs many times for years and years and years. I also nowadays go, and I made a Moe's video where I just try to climb out entirely Moe's in a day. I did, you know, multiple V13s, V12s, V12 flash, like multiple. So I definitely understand.
That is so fucking crazy. Sorry, that just like, I don't think people realize how crazy that is, but go on. Just so impressed
for
with
me,
you for
like,
that. Good job.
And now I'm trying to go the other way, where I'm going back again to like beating my head against something, and hopefully the process goes a little bit smoother for me, because back in the day I didn't understand what I was doing. I had goals just like you, where I was like, here's the picture of this climb. Like Spectre for me was my number one boulder that I wanted to do, and I found that out when I was climbing like V6. I saw a picture of Kevin Jorgensen's projects, the shoes that 510 made for Spectre, and a picture of him on it. And I was like, that's badass. I saw it in a magazine, and I was like, I need to go do that climb. Found out it was in Bishop, which was like, for me, it became my home crag. And I tried Spectre for, I think, 6 years. And I went out multiple times, and I sent it. I think I stuck the crux move, and I fell on the swing out, like dry fired. And then 2 years later, I sent it after like 40 tries in that one session, where I stuck the move 6 more times in that one session. And it was a crazy thing. But at the time, all I cared about was sending Spectre, and that was my goal. And, you know, I did a bunch of sims and like a bunch of movements in the gym that were kind of like it, but I never spent time to understand what the challenge actually was. I never spent time thinking about the challenge and really understanding what I needed to do to get this climb done. I just pretended that if I tried Spectre a bunch of times, and I tried really hard, and I trained really hard, and I got strong at front levers, got strong at crimping, you know, body tension and whatever stuff, like it would just happen. And I showed up, and it didn't just always happen. I always ran into something else. And my point here is that, yeah, you want to just get better at climbing for sure. Yeah, you want to just get better at that style that you're trying to accomplish. But, you know, this is the big thing for me, is that performance is hard. Performance, that word performance, is hard. Performing in general always has these other factors that you have to deal with in terms of, you know, executing what you actually can accomplish in the moment, but dealing with these external factors, and then also just being aware in that moment and anticipating certain things. You know, Adam Ondra is the perfect climber, not just because he has the ability, the endurance, the strength, the technique to be able to perform climbing movements, but he also has a performance mindset, right? He shows up and he visualizes for hours and hours and hours, for days and days and days before he goes on something, right? Even if he is already trying something, obviously in that video where he was trying to flash 515, you could see that process, but I guarantee you on stuff that he's projecting, he's still spending time visualizing, right? Even on Silence, he was on the ground many tries after. He's not assuming that because he's done the moves a bunch of times that he can do them again. He's still practicing, like, how do I be more in the moment? How do I try harder in this spot? Like, what do I think about that prevents me from committing to something, right? Because those are the things that, our Testpiece podcast is about, what about the other things, right? Like, okay, you can hangboard. Okay, you can strength train. Okay, you can do this volume training and whatnot. But what about the other things? Why is it that I have, a bunch of clients who go out and try to send their projects and then fail? Right? It's like they clearly are doing their training plans. They're clearly doing their work. They're clearly going out and doing their things. But what's that next step? What is that next step? To me, it's performance. It's understanding truly performance. So when Josh and I had this conversation on the phone, and he was like, "I'm going to do Tamet Jerry. I'm going to do these climbs in Majorca. I'm going to climb all the moonboard climbs." I'm like, "Great. So get better at climbing. Like every time you go, challenge yourself. Every time you go, set it up, perform as best as you can, and then take the little times, take all the time afterward, take all the time between, take all the time before you go out and try your project to understand, okay, this is what I just did. This is what I was able to do. And this is what I think I might have to do to send this project, right? I think goals are really, really important, right? Having a goal for, having a very specific goal to look forward to can adjust the little bits of, curriculum that you give to yourself in the day, if you can. If not, you're not going to do anything about it, right? What are you going to do if you're going to try, Grand Illusion's your project, but you have this home wall that's like 30 degrees overhung? What can you do that's going to make you climb Grand Illusion better? It's not going to be physical. It's not going to be trying Grand Illusion sims. It's not going to work like that. But you can try to anticipate, like, okay, Grand Illusion, you probably have to climb it pretty quickly, right? You don't want to camp out on every move. So I'm just going to set these, 15 move long, circuits and just try to sequence it and, spend less than 2 seconds on each hold. I'm just going to make those decisions quickly. That's a really nuanced thing that you can understand about what's hard about Grand Illusion, right? Every time I, do this squeezing style, I can't relax. And if I need to stay in Grand Illusion, I need to learn how to relax. So every time I do a hard, compression move, like, bah, I'm going to try to relax my muscles, right? That's a fundamental performance thing that people aren't aware of, right? Is like how on the revs are you and how off the revs are you, right? That's a huge part of performance that people do not practice, right? So for me, it's like you can have a specific goal and you can understand how you might achieve that goal, but you also just have to understand performance and like what that climb requires of you in terms of performance. And every climb's a little bit different. If your project's a slab, it's going to be different. But are you going to go train on slab? Dude, I did focus for, the Bishop highball link up thing that I did. And that's all like vert climbing. It's all like super thin, like bouncy feet. Do you know how much of that I do on a year basis? Never. Almost never. I go to Bishop and then I do it, right? But I understand deeply what it takes to be able to trust a foot. And so when I go to the gym, I just try to like feel intimacy on my feet and like seeing, that sounded weird. But I try to just like be more aware of like what stepping on my toes feels like in general. And then I go there and I try my absolute best. For me, that performance aspect is really that bridge that I'm trying to connect from my home wall to, my gym wall to the outdoor rigs.
Yeah, no, this is cool, man. I mean, I'm just going to put like random fake numbers on this, but it's like you put 95% of your effort into being a better climber, and then 5% into how specific techniques of climbing may apply to the goal that you have. So, the idea of doing a hard move and then finding out how much you can relax, it's like that is a key for doing multiple hard moves in a row. And something like Grand Illusion is a lot of hard moves in a row. And so it's not that it's not that technique that you're saying only applies to Grand Illusion. It's just like, that is what good climbing is. And, the idea of then recognizing what is required for the task at hand kind of shrinks down, and you don't dedicate much of your thoughts into, okay, like it has, this size crimp, so I'm going to hang on crimsole.
Right. I hate, dude. That's like the most common thing that I see, where it's like,
that's literally what I'm going to talk about and doing. So I guess I'll go on.
And I don't think that's a bad thing to also do, right? But it's like, that's not the priority. That's not the priority focus, because it's not the priority issue. But it's definitely going to help you. Like, absolutely, it's going to help you, of course, right?
So this is where I actually really do agree with you. And it's funny because I'm, I don't know. Let me just showcase it by explaining my situation. And I made these goals. I actually have never really made goals in climbing other than I want to be able to climb anything I see, right? I love the I love just feeling strong on rock and or plastic. I love that feeling. And I also love being able to walk up to a climb or see a picture and just say, oh, that one. Like, and it's not always the grade, you know, it's just, what is that? I want that one. I want to collect that one. Uh, so I just, you know, I'm getting a little older though. And I just am kind of realizing I had some like moment where I was just thinking to myself, I only have so many trips left. Like it's like, oh, I want to go to Italy. I want to go to Sayus. I want to go to all this. And it's like, you may not get to all of those places. And then it just made me question, not question, made me say, okay, so what do I really want to do? And I made this list, and yeah, you mentioned Tomet Jarry, which is just this, it's this 60-meter tufa line in the Verdun Gorge. And I just remember seeing a picture of it and just thinking, that is the coolest fucking thing ever. For some reason, I think it's because of the era when I grew up, like blue tufas just have this thing for me that I just can't resist. And literally the first time I saw a picture of that, I created an Apple note, and I just made a bucket list of like, this is the climb that I want to do. Sorry,
Didn't you also say somebody that you knew said it was like the best sport pitch ever?
God, who said that? I don't know. That
If
might
anyone
have
says
been...
that, even if it's not a pro climber or anything, you have to try it, right? Like if anyone, I can't honestly say I've done something that I'll call the best pitch ever.
No, you know who it was? It was that blog I sent you from Steve McClure, you know, super famous UK climber. And I think he flashed it. I think he said it was maybe the best route he's ever done.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's like vertical or vert-ish, probably overhanging-ish. Yeah, probably it's overhung, but not like 40 degrees overhung. And it's 60 meters of tufas, like, which is just enduro fest. And I'm like, okay, I want to go do that. And then in the deep water soloing world, and this has nothing to do with me picking a sport climb and then deep water solo. It's just like, these are the ones that are on my bucket list. There's this 13D or 8B. Yeah. And Tomet Jarry is 14A, like 8B plus. And there's this climb called like Hunkalump, I don't know. It's some crazy name, but it's an 8B in Mallorca. That's, you know, so it's not crazy tall, but it's exposed. It's like a pockety roof. That's just freaking gorgeous. And I've done the climbs next to it, like a 8A plus and a 7C, and just looking at it, I just knew I have to go do it. And so that's very different, right? It's like pockety roof climbing in Mallorca, deep water soloing. And then in the bouldering world, I haven't really ever projected. I told you, Tim, I don't even know if I've tried a V14. You know, maybe like, so I've pulled on to, I know it's kind of crazy. I've pulled on to, I mean, I've done mandala, and I've tried the sit maybe 2 or 3 times over the years, but I mean, it's like over the decades, you know, and it's broken now. It's kind of consensus V14. And I've always, when I did the mandala, even though I topped it out, I didn't climb on the very top because there was snow on it. And you can listen to the Jamie Emerson pod where I talk about like, did I start it like Chris did? And does it count if I didn't top out? Doesn't matter. I just always had this idea. Well, that's fine, because I'll go back and I'll do it from the sit. And, you know, there's a lot of history to that boulder. It was my first V12. It's just, there's some meaning there. And I just decided, you know what, Josh, like you should go do that climb. Like that's hard. You know, it'd be nice. I think of myself as a stronger than V13 climber, although I've never climbed harder than V13, but you know, you have to actually perform and execute it. And I'm on the Moonboard and I love it. And the reason why I bring that up last is that it has to do with, my goal on the Moonboard is to do all the freaking Moonboard climbs. And barring that, I'd like to be top 5 in the world on the ranking, which may sound, it sounds ambitious, but I mean, you know, Tim, if Aiden Roberts or Jimmy Webb or Dana Woods decided they wanted to be the king of the Moonboard, they would be. So it's, you know, it's not quite as maybe amazing as it sounds. But the reason why I bring that up last is because when I think about maximizing what's available, I think about finding how to get that inspiration to try really hard and go deep and, you know, fall in love with the process, like Dave Fitzgerald was talking about. And, you know, I just don't have a lot of time, Tim. I have a Moonboard in my garage, not actually because I want to have a Moonboard in my garage, but often because I just don't have the time to drive to the gym. I've got a lot of responsibility. And what I'm realizing is that for me to really perform my best, I have to fall in love with what's right in front of me. I have to be inspired. I have to have a goal that is right in front of me. And so this is tying into the idea of maximizing your, what you got. And so, finding these tricks to, you're at the gym, maybe what your goal is to every new set you do all of the hardest climbs, and that's your goal. Or maybe it's just the hardest one, or maybe you're a V8 climber and you say, I'm going to do every single V8 and below at the gym, or I'm going to always do the V8s. And just setting up these scenarios that you actually love and fall in love with to bring out your best, I think is a really crucial thing. Because when I talk about that Tom at Jarry, it's a 60-meter tufa line. Like I'm not, I have no tufas. I climb on a 6-foot tall piece of plywood. So how do I prepare for that? And it's kind of, to go back to your thing, in some ways I don't. Like I can't really. But what I can do is really figure out how to perform, like you're talking about. And for me to do that, I have to find inspiration in what's in front of me. And for me to find inspiration, I have to fall in love. And like that's kind of how I wanted to showcase what it means to take advantage of what's in front of you. And for me, this is the situation I'm in. So I'm like, okay, Josh, you got a moonboard. Be the best fucking moonboarder, hopefully in the world, but at least the best moonboard I can be. And so that's kind of how I tackle these very disparate goals with the reality of what's actually in front of me.
Oh, I love it. I love, everything that you just said, but primarily, what you're talking about is, but look, I've got these goals, for you, they're seemingly pretty serious goals. You're acknowledging that you're coming towards the decline of the peak of your career. That's a climber. And that's awesome though. You've had such a long career of climbing. You've done so much climbing, but at the same time, you're still like, but if I die one day, I know I would have loved to try to do these things. And you have a couple of specific things. First of all, that's, props to you, man. That's really good on you. That's super, super cool. Seeing somebody who's a dad and like in their late 30s. For me personally, like watching somebody who's like, you know what, fuck it. Like, I've got to do this climb. I'm going to do that climb, and I'm going to do these climbs. I'm going to do these goals. And just saying that, I think it just sets you up for it. It just sets you up to be like, well, like, if I were to do these things, like what would it look like? And, what would I kind of do? And you're acknowledging that for you, you just need to try hard every day. And how do you do that? You have to love everything that you do, right? That's the number one thing that I heard. And that is super underrated, by the way, right? Like just loving what we do and just like making sure that we're having fun doing what we're doing and really being obsessed. You don't even have to have fun. You just have to be obsessed, like that's a weird thing to say. And like people always say like, the best climber is the one who's having the most fun. It's like, no, the best climber is the one who's the most obsessed. The most obsessed one's probably having the most fun as well. But let's face it, like you and I have rage sessions all the time, where it's like you're just foot picking all the time. You're, missing the hold and you're like, what the, like you're so upset, but because you're obsessed, right? And that's ultimately what brings out the best out of you, brings out the best try hard. It brings out the best analysis. It brings out the best positive adaptations is when you're obsessed. It's not positive or negative. It's just obsession. And I think that's and for you, that's love, right? And obviously like the moonboard is something that you love, and it's clear, that it's awesome, because I don't love the moonboard. If I had a moonboard, I don't think I would fall in love with it, but I would learn to fall in love with, whatever climbing I would allow myself to have as my number one access. I think that's probably the most underrated piece of this setup that we're talking about. Like we're talking about all these kind of nuances in your mindset and like what you focus on, preseason, during the season, and like during your actual attempts going to your projects. But let's face it, man, like you want to climb a ton. You want to work on yourself as a climber a ton. You want to work on performance a ton. And the first and foremost thing that's probably the most important is that, learn to be obsessed and put yourself in a place that is, easily obsessive for you. And it's not the moonboard for everybody,
Well,
but for you that is.
I just want to point out, so I agree with everything. And I just want to give maybe some tactics on how to maybe fall in love and be obsessed. And I think that I don't know if it's totally fair to just say that, you'll just fall in love. I did not love the moonboard when I first I bought a moonboard during the pandemic. I was never a moonboarder. And it was kind of something that I fell in love with because it was there and I embraced the process. And there's some tips that I would give to make things more serious and give them that weight. I videoed myself. I shared it with my friends. I put it on Instagram, and I think you might be surprised that if all you have is a little home wall, and you make up a project, and then you video it, put it on Instagram, make it something that's tangible that you're putting out there as a goal that you want to achieve. You know, it builds up in your mind, and obsession often comes from doing something more. Like it's sometimes you can't wait for love to strike. And just this is weird, but I'm married, right? And it's like you would think that, oh well, it's like it's love at first sight, and like I love my girlfriend and now my wife, but you build up a relationship over time. You get more and more, hopefully, in good relationships, more and more into a person. I'd say that's me with moonboarding. It's not that like I loved it the first time, but it's like this is what I have. Okay, like I'm in. Like, and rather than always looking for something else, get married to whatever get married to whatever options you have available to you. Maybe it's a shitty home, Craig. Maybe it's your shitty gym, but find a way to fall in love with it, and it'll take you a lot further than if you kind of poo-poo or denigrate, think it's like not that great. And one last
Wow.
Get
I
married.
Love that, dude. That was great.
Get married to your moonboard. That my wife would probably say that I spend more time with my moonboard than her. So one other, so I think we agreed that really it's 95% about like the climbing, and that's where that and so I was giving Tim crap because he was talking about the climbing, and I'm like, no, like you have this tool available to you. It's the moonboard, so or your gym, and so it's like about practicing at that thing. And we come to it actually in the middle because I think we both agree fundamentally it's the climbing is the foundation. But I will say one thing that I'm doing is for mandala sit. There's a move. It's actually the stand move. You do a bump move into a decent left hand crimp, and for me, I have a hard time moving off of that. That's probably the crux for me on the stand, and it looks like the sit. And so after talking to Dave Fitzgerald too, I'm doing one arm hangs. And it's something that I've never done before. But I have a hunch that if I go and am able to hang, a small crimp with one arm, that it will help me with that move. And I would also think that if I'm going to go to Mallorca and do a bunch of deep pockets on a roof, I might do some pocket training. And so, that's one of the benefits about having goals is, you can maybe break it down and chunk something and just say, okay, like, I'm just going to be a better climber, but that 5%, it's not wrong to prepare. And, you look at someone like John Cardwell, who, is a 515 climber, but it's so hard and it's at his limit that when he prepares for a route, he's preparing for a route. And I think that's okay to acknowledge that if you have a goal, there are sometimes specific things, but just recognize that it's a 5%, not a 50%. If I sit on the hangboard the whole time, I'm not going to show up and crush mandala.
Yeah, I want to share some thoughts on that kind of like percentage breakdown you have, because I think you're right on with it, but I think everyone can adjust to whatever their projects are, the importance of their projects, the likelihood of them sending their projects, right? Because like mandala sit's a really good project for you. It's that kind of like 105% where like you kind of need 5% more to do it right now. I'm not sure, actually. That's just my guess. Honestly, just from watching you climb on the board, I'm like, you are for sure strong enough, but like, do you have the technique? Do you have the performance aspect? Do you know all this stuff? Like, probably not. You probably need like 5% more. But physically, you have it there. So, I said this on another podcast previously. I don't know where it was, but picking projects is really difficult, and you should be picking projects that are in the 90 to 110% range. You don't want to go too far past 110%. This is what's required, right? I always see every rock climb and every thing in performance as, what percentage is required out of you, right, to get this thing done. And projects are really, really nice to pick in like the 90% to 110% range, because 90% is in your perfect output attempt. If you output at 90, that's how much it would take you to climb. But it's really hard to climb perfectly, so you have to work on that as well. But if you're climbing perfectly a lot, you just have been on point, like a lot of the time, you just know the sequences, you commit to the sequences, you don't hesitate, like all this stuff, then maybe pick a harder project that year, right? Where you're like, all right, I'm going to go for my 110% where I need a little bit more. If you go too far past that, you're going to get a little bit lost, and like you might need a lot more. That 5% number that Josh is talking about, where 95% of your sessions are kind of the same. You're working on yourself as a climber in general and you're getting better, but that 5% is leaning towards that project. You're going to realize that 5% number is going to be a lot bigger for those harder projects where you're like, if I want to send this project, I need like 50% dedicated. That's not really a good project. That's just, you need to get better at climbing in general to be able to even approach this project. But so basically, if you have that number, I think you should just adjust to it and find minimum requirements for your project for each session, right? Like Josh and I both have kind of our routine in the gym, right? Like we climb the climbing. I have my warm-ups and I have my own like drills that I do every session, right? I always have these certain awarenesses every session, no matter what. It doesn't matter if I'm climbing in competitions in the next month, if I'm going to Lander, if I'm going, anywhere else, it doesn't matter. I have this constant thing that I do in the gyms and workouts that I generally do. I'll pretty much always do pull-ups and push-ups. Pretty much always. I pretty much always try to do some dumbbell pressing because it helps me just like feel stable in my arms. I pretty much always do like toes to bar front levers. Those are my pretty much alwayses. But if I'm going to Bishop, I'm hangboarding on sub 15 mil holds way more often. If I'm going to Lander, I'm going to hang on pockets way more often. If I'm doing any sort of technical foot climbing, I'm going to put my shoes on, like my Solution comps or whatever, and be really precarious about my footwork, right? If I'm climbing in the comps, I try to be really squeezy with my feet. Like very specific things for minimum requirements kind of show up for me. And it's usually intuitive. It's not something that I write down, but it probably would help for a lot of you guys. If you have a project, like Josh is saying, mandala sit for him, there's a specific movement where the crimp for him specifically, he needs to work on dead hanging more on the one arm, and for me, I would say if I were to analyze mandala sit, and I have never tried it before, for me, the biggest thing would be that latch move, that first move on the sit, on the stand start. The first move on the V12 is usually for me like the hardest move. And I see a lot of people struggle on that move more so than any other move on the climb. You probably don't. You probably don't struggle on that move, so you shouldn't work on it, right? You can understand the crux of this climb, but the challenge of the climb. The mystery behind like the actual mechanics that make it difficult, right? And because that, you can be more specific about the minimum requirements for what training you should include as part of, on top of your regular base of climbing. And I guess like if, again, like I said before, if that climb is actually too hard for you, you might have to have a wider minimum requirement and just adjust that day to day. But if you don't have a specific goal, I think we should have minimum requirements for all sorts of things. So I have an actionable for just in general, most sessions. And this kind of ties into having some minimum requirements. And, the interesting thing is what Josh and I are talking about. It is a 5%, 10% change in your sessions. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do mandala sit and I've never tried it before, or I've tried it before and I got, not that close on it. I'm going to do a ton of hangboarding. I'm going to do a ton of one arm hanging. I'm going to do a ton of latching stuff. Like, again, that's not going to do that much for your, like, you should just get better at climbing because you're going to get there. You're going to try it and you're going to analyze all these different things about climbing. And if you don't actually know how to deconstruct a climb and try a project and, have a long power endurance try, if you don't know how to warm up, if you don't know how to trust your feet, you don't know how to relax after you do a hard movement, the general performance things, those are probably things you should work on in your average climbing. But other than the minimum requirements, this is actually another point that Dave made, work on your base, work on your base as a climber. And for me, I say always start and finish your sessions with your base 15 to 30 minutes before and after. What is the base? What is the base for rock climbing? And for me, the base for rock climbing is a wide variety of things. And it's not all of these things. Some people are going to be really, really good at some of these things and really, really bad at some of these things. Some people are going to be okay at all of these things and, maybe not so good at all these. But I see these as really good bases to work on mobility. Hangboard. So that's grip variety for me. It's not just hangboarding. It's do you have an even amount of strength in your open handing, in your half crimping, in your full crimping, and we're learning about high angle crimping. Do you understand like split finger crimping and all this stuff? So hangboard is really good to have in your base routine. Start and finish your sessions with the hangboard if that's a weakness of yours. Footwork drills, extending your feet, not cutting your feet, only cutting your feet. These are all specific drills that I think a lot of people can have in their warm up or in their cool down that will help a lot. And then the last note that I make there is just climb your opposite. Whatever you normally climb, most people will go into the gym, warm up quickly, and then just get on the climbs, right? And you have to understand what your style naturally is. Most people know that to a certain degree. And in before that and after that, I would just climb your opposite, right? Like, okay, just have a little bit of awareness for what, there's a new set. Okay, great. Look at the new set, see what you're going to do and like how you're going to climb on it. Go warm up on another not new set or warm up on the new set. Look at the hard climbs that you're about to try, and on the easy climbs, just climb at the opposite of what you might see. If you see a bunch of like crimp ladders, climb a bunch of pinches, climb a bunch of slopers. And, if you see a bunch of slopers and like dynamic movements, climb really slow on like the crimps. There's such a good way to balance yourself, even without having a specific project, even without having a specific goal. So this is kind of to go on actionables for maximizing what you have. I think this is, for me, something I've practiced my entire climbing life, and it's been the most helpful for me. What do you think about that one?
What I really like is the idea of starting your sessions with a base and finishing it with a base. And it makes me think of some quote from some famous ski racer or coach. I think he was a racer. And the question was, what are the 3 most important turns? And it's like the first 3 and the last 3. And it's that you're ingraining good technique when you're fresh and when you're tired. So at the end of the session, you're tired and it's really tempting to be sloppy, but it's like, no, like you don't want that to be ingrained in your body and brain, that, bad technique. So just making sure that, it's technique in the beginning, technique at the end. And you broke down some of the things that you like to do for technique. And, it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting. It made me think of my approach, and with mandala, this idea of building up a base. When I did mandala as my first 12, and it's probably soft as a 12 when I did it, but I still took the grade. But what happened is that I had maybe tried it like years ago or something, and I was just like, wow, I can't do that first move, that kind of bump move. And then I walked up to it a couple of years later, and I did it in that session, and I did it. And I remember getting on that bump move and just kind of thinking it wasn't that bad.
Just eating it.
Well, and it's just interesting because, the point is that like I'd become a better climber. I'd become stronger as well. But, I didn't train for mandala when I did it. And so now I'm in this interesting thing where either I'm reaching my current limits, or whatever the case may be. Now I'm trying to direct my focus on a specific output. And what I anticipate actually happening is, you're right, Tim. I actually don't have a problem with that first move, even coming from the sit. The few times I've tried it, I can go through the sit pretty consistently and do that move or get very close. And I don't think that's going to be a stopper for me. But that left hand, that next move is really hard for me because that hold doesn't feel so great for me. But then what's going to be interesting is, wouldn't be surprised if I do that and then I fall off the top, because all of a sudden now it's more of a power endurance problem. And I reach my next kind of like, okay, like you got through that first crux or whatever, and now you have a new issue. And it wouldn't surprise me if it sends me back to the drawing board and I say, okay, like, what does that mean? Like, what do I do now? And I just think it shows you what it really means to be a good climber. You might think that what you needed for a climb was finger strength, and then you might get that, and then you might fail at something you didn't anticipate. And this is why it's I don't know, it goes deep.
Dude, and what you're saying is like you might not know the challenge until you try it and fail, right? That's like a huge thing is, if we put too much emphasis, that's why that 5% number is really, important, because if you put too much emphasis on the training aspect of it, you're assuming, you are assuming what is difficult about a problem. And you might be correct. You might be correct from asking 10 other people, like, what's the hardest part about mandala sit? Like, what should I try to work on? And they can tell you a bunch of things, but again, we're all just assuming, what's the best practice for training that. You might have a different understanding of power endurance training as a whole. You might have a different understanding of efficiency as a whole, right? So you're like, I'm going to climb most efficiently through the bottom, and I'm going to have great power endurance for the top. But you could be training in a totally different way than I am, and you might not understand exactly how that applies. And then you're going to try and be like, damn it, like, okay, I thought this was efficient, but it's not. It's not so efficient. So you're constantly working on, like, can I climb the bottom more efficiently so I have more energy for the top? Or do I work on my base and get more of a base so that I just can have more power endurance? So, the hard climbing doesn't phase me as much. It's like, why don't you just train both in all aspects of climbing, and you'll get there and you'll realize how to make the small adjustments in that moment. Is, for me, that's always been the thing I try to do. It's very difficult to do that. But more so in the last couple of years of my climbing, I've really tried to do that, because I just go places and like set myself up for it. I'm like, fuck, like I had no idea what was super, super hard about this. And this is, I would rather have spent my time just being a better climber and being better at performing, and it would have shown me by the time I got here, right? And like, we're not afraid to fail in that way too, like, I think it'd be extremely daunting for you to train for 3 months for Tom Jerry. You're doing a bunch of sport climbing, you're doing a bunch of tufa climbing and a bunch of pinch climbing in the gym, and you're like, all right, I'm ready. And I go for a 2-week long trip to the Verdun, and you can't do it. And you're like, you're only worried about that success aspect. You're only worried about like getting that done, versus like, what about your goal is climb as best as you can every time you go, right? Okay, we're going to lean you towards doing more long pinch climbing, 5-10% of your sessions, so that you get a little bit more used to it and you understand the challenges that are part of it. And you just try to meet those challenges, and you get there, and your goal again is to just climb as best as you can. But now you have a very specific challenge that is deep in your desires, but you're not just trying to win. You're not just trying to get this end result. Having that, I got to tell you, man, like, every youth athlete I've ever worked with, including myself, gets distracted on that end result. Everybody is like that. If you have an end result and all you care about that is end result, what are you focusing on the entire time? You're focusing on everything that's not getting you the end result, and you're focused on everything you should try to do to get you the end result. You're not focusing in the moment and actually climbing your best, which takes a ton. It takes a ton of effort. It takes a ton of technique. It takes a ton of analysis and awareness and positive energy and commitment to get that stuff done. And if you are attached to sending Tom at Jerry and 20 meters deep, you're like, I'm more pumped than I thought I would be. Oh, instantly you're not sending that climb. I know.
Yeah. And then you think like, oh, I didn't train right. Like, oh, I'm not strong enough.
Right.
Like, and that's, I told you I was messaging with my buddy, Brooks Walker, who's a great American sport climber. And I was like, hey, Brooks, do you want to go and do Tom Edgery? He was like, hell yeah, dude. Like, and that just speaks to the kind of guy he is. So sometimes you have to find people to actually go and do these things with you, because not everyone wants to do
Right.
that. But yeah, something that Brooks said that you can see, he basically internalized what you're talking about, is he was very kind to me and said, I made some, of course, negative comment, like, I don't know if I have the endurance for that's like my opposite style, Brooks, like a 60-meter tufa climb. And he said, don't worry, Josh, like, you'll figure out your way up there, something like that. Where just, what he said to me, or what I took away from it that really made me feel good, was like, his belief was just like, I don't know, Josh, you're a good climber. Like, you'll make it work. You won't, maybe you won't do it like me, because Brooks has incredible endurance, but you'll do it. I mean, of course, I don't even need to, like, it's funny because I look at that, of all my tech lists, Tom at Jerry, I want to go there and climb on it. If I don't do it, you also have to acknowledge that if you really try your hardest at something, usually, and if you fail at it, usually actually don't feel so bad. Like, you
Totally.
go, well, Tim, I'm getting tired. You wore me out talking about moonboarding and all my different goals. But I realized that I didn't share my pro tip, and it links directly into what we're talking about, maximizing what you got. And it's funny because when I wrote it, it had nothing to do with the actual topic, but now I'm going to link it in anyways, because that's what I do as a podcaster, is link things that seem disparate. So what I see all the time is that people don't straighten their legs. And this is one of the most obvious things in video analysis. And typically when we've brought it up, it's standing up. It's like, oh, I can't reach something. It's like, dude, your leg is, bent, right? Like you actually have the reach. But where I also see it, and I think it's a little more nuanced, is in flagging and in pogos. And the reason why I'm going to link it into this topic of ours of maximizing what you got is that extra little length, whether it's height for a big move, whether it's just the counterpoint in a flag, or the counter, or or the momentum on a pogo, is so important. And just to do anything less than that is to shortchange yourself. And it makes me think of gymnastics. And when we do swings in gymnastics, or they're always like point your toes, straight legs. And it's, yes, it looks good, but it looks good because it actually is good. It gives you more momentum. And so just check yourself on flagging and pogos. Are your legs actually straight? And that extension, maybe you are a shorter climber, or you're struggling with a move, make sure that you're using everything God gave you.
I love this pro tip. I think this is a super underrated one. Is just a lot of emphasis in what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to pogo, emphasize the shit out of that pogo. I came from basketball, and basketball, the big thing when you're shooting a basketball is to follow through, hand in the cookie jar, shoot that thing and leave that hand up there. And the reason for that is because most kids, when they play basketball, they retract their throwing arm, right? For some reason, when you throw the ball, you always go backwards, and that limits exactly the amount of power and range you want to have, the arc that you want to have with that ball. Climbing is no different. When you create load for something, you want to follow through with that, right? I think the biggest thing that I see, on top of having not fully straight and flag legs, which is really important, right? If you want to create this nice tripod stance, you got to have the widest tripod stance. It's really nice for like creating plumb lines and having nice balance. Pogos, yeah, you definitely want to be able to extend that leg so you have as much reach. But when you're loading up for movements, I see people generate maybe 40 to 60% of what you can generate when you're loading up for big movements, right? When you're going for that backswing. That backswing is something that I never see people do enough of. And so it's not always necessary, and it's not always that important. It's sometimes too much, right? But teaching yourself how much you can generate, I think, is always nice to follow through with it and emphasize that a lot. It's definitely something that we practice a lot as team kids, was like, all right, you're going to do this dyno. How much can you go backwards on this dyno before you go forward? How much can you? And you got to learn that and teach yourself that. So I love that pro tip. Maximize what you have is, definitely something that we can practice on all aspects of climbing. I know Josh and I talked and, deep dove on what we did in terms of like physical things in the gym and our practices for climbing and, goal setting and whatnot. But, at the end of it, I chose to put a lot of the emphasis on our performance brain, mostly working on ourselves and our base, and you said something interesting about that first 3 turns and last 3 turns, and, allowing that time when you're the most tired and the most fresh to put the most emphasis on your technique. It's actually not even why I brought that up. The reason why I brought that up was because I think that most people climb in most of their sessions on just stuff that they're good at, and you're only working on stuff that you're good at all the time. That's actually a really good point. If you're going to work on technique in general when you're tired and when you're fresh, you're going to have way more good technique that you're working on. But also, you just don't have a good variety if you're not working on, different skill sets. You're only going to work on the things that you're good at. Therefore, you have a very biased opinion on what works and what doesn't work, right? And I think that's probably the biggest weakness that I see in a lot of climbers. It's just their opinions. It's their belief levels, right? It's something that's really, really hard to work on. Even if you just get coached on it for one session, it's not going to change for you. You have to work on your own opinions and your own beliefs. One big note, and we can close the podcast. But I said, outside of drills, outside of footwork drills, hangboarding drills, or whatever, focus on the performance brain, guys. No matter what tools or access you have to climbing, you can improve the ability to stay clear-headed. You can improve the ability to visualize and plan. You can improve the ability to commit and analyze. There's so many things you can improve your base ability as a climber, but you need to improve being the driver. You can be stronger in the fingers. You can be stronger in the arms. You can be stronger in the core, but you are driving your ship as a human, as an athlete, as a climber. So you have to always practice awareness, and you always have to practice aggression, right? Knowing what's going on and trying 100% and being aggressive to make sure that happens is really, really important things to practice. And that keyword there, practice. I always practice my breathing before. So these are more things that I do to practice these things. I always practice my breathing before and during attempts. So right before I go, I try to check my, like, am I ready to turn the revs on? And then on the wall, I try to make sure that I have that. I have very specific rhythmic breathing where it kind of keeps me relaxed, but also brace breathing and aggressive breathing to make sure that I stick movements. I make sure I inhale before I, create any sort of tension. I've taught this to any person that I've ever coached. I sequence every movement, but then I visualize it. I climb it visually. It allows me to have better anticipation, so I'm not shocked when holds feel like shit, even though I knew that it was probably going to feel like that if I had visualized it. I'm not shocked at hard positions because I could visualize it. I'm not shocked when my feet cut because I know that I was supposed to visualize that as well. So just sequencing your left, right is not going to help you as much as climbing it. Climb it visually and try to improve on that ability as well. And then the last thing is I work on objective criticisms for myself, not what it felt like. I really try to avoid, and I am the worst at it, but I always say, I felt like this, I'm like, okay, what actually happened, right? What actually happened and what should I adjust based on what just happened? And the better you can get at that objective criticism, the better you can get at giving yourself better tips. But for me, these are all kind of the performance brain. When I'm talking about the performance brain, these are the things that I kind of work on. And yeah,
I love it. I mean, that's executing performance. It's, if you want to, use what you have, you got to show up in that way, utilizing all of those things, and practicing that is important. So yeah, I guess for me to sum it up, it's this, idea that what you have in front of you, fall in love with it and go deep, because it will make you a better climber, whether that's the Moonboard or the kilter board. Ben Sneed, looking at you. Whatever it is that you have available, maybe it's just your basement wall, maybe it's amazing home crag, but embrace diving deep into it so that you really learn climbing. Because even though I hear I don't want this to overshadow what Tim's saying about exposing yourself to different things. Like we're saying, sometimes you don't have that available. Although I would argue often you have more available than you think you do, whether it's different hold types, different, drop knees or heel hooks, just embrace all that movement. But, if you go deep on whatever it is that you have available to you, you will learn climbing through that process. And then, if you've got a goal, like you're going to a pockety place, or you've got a specific climb in mind, there's nothing wrong with preparing for that specifically. But I think to maximize what you have available is to go deep and to fall in love and to really focus on those things Tim's talking about. And you'll come out a better climber. And maybe that project that you think was so hard will be easy, or maybe it still will be hard. And you'll go back to the drawing board and say, oh man, I guess I need mono strength for Action Direct. Okay, let's go hang monos. That's it for me, Tim. That was a blast. I love our guests. Of course I love our guests, but I love talking to you, Tim. And that was really fun for me.
I love just like sharing our experiences and thoughts and perspectives. I think it's really nice that, we are trying to deep dive on something like maximizing, I'm sure this is a struggle that kind of everybody has a little bit daily in their climbing practices. Definitely something that Josh and I have gone through back and forth, good and bad. So hopefully this helps you guys a little bit. I had a ton of fun, Josh, and hopefully see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, come visit us in the classroom and let us know how, what constraints you have, and we'll help you deal with them, because it's a fundamental thing in climbing is constraints. And you have kids? Me too. It's like, so what now? Like, do you want excuses, or do you want to find out what you're capable of given those constraints? So
yes, sir.
All right, Tim. On that note, I'm going to go pick up my kids.
All right.
Take care, dude.
See ya.
Good to talk to you.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece Climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.